My husband was in a car accident, and I contacted the company he works for to inform them of what happened. However, they told me something that I totally did not see coming. There was no such employee working for us, ma'am. Are you sure you have the correct name? Yes, ma'am, I'm positive I do. Could you please check again? I just checked, and it seems that he's resigned voluntarily. As to why he did so, I was astonished when the receptionist told me the reason for his resignation. This is the story of how a car accident sent me down the rabbit hole of what my husband was hiding, and upon discovering the truth, how I exacted my revenge on him for the pain he'd caused us. My name is Barbara, and I'm a 32-year-old office employee. I used to live with my husband, Tim. We initially met in high school, but we were never more than friends at school. How we eventually got together was when we met again at a reunion years after we graduated. Perhaps the extra years helped us grow into different people, because we hit it off pretty well and we started dating. After 13 months, we got married. I was actually Tim's first girlfriend, so he had little experience with love and relationships. It was for this precise reason that my friends were worried about this lack of romantic experience. What if he wants to have fun with other girls after getting married? What if he gets pretty controlling and you lose your freedom? These were a few things that my friends would tell me when they warned me about marrying someone with little experience in relationships. But I was confident that Tim would love me and only me forever, so I didn't listen to my friends' words. In fact, we had been married for 2 years, and we were always in very pure love with each other. Tim wanted me to stay home as much as possible after we got married, so I resigned from my full-time job and started working part-time instead. I didn't have to work because we could make ends meet on his salary alone. But since we didn't have a child yet, I didn't feel comfortable staying home and doing nothing every day. So I asked him to let me at least work part-time. I was glad I did ask him, and I was still working a good job I enjoyed because it gave me a little time away from home to relax. My daily happiness was always waiting for Tim to come home. I was very happy to put his suit on the hanger every evening when he came home, and then, over dinner, we would talk about the day's events. I was happy every day. More recently, however, instead of the usual small talk about the day, the dinner conversation began to almost entirely consist of his complaints about his workplace. Believe me when I say that his whining and mumbling of dissatisfaction sometimes took hours. He would say that he really didn't like Mr. Kilmer, who was Tim's colleague at work. Apparently, Mr. Kilmer, who had joined the company at around the same time as Tim did, had recently been promoted to section chief. Tim couldn't understand it and was very frustrated. He wanted to be promoted and believed he deserved it because he was working hard at his job. So I could sort of understand his frustration at not being recognized for his efforts. But all the talking about Mr. Kilmer every day made me feel like that he might be a little too obsessed with what he wasn't satisfied with. Oh, honey, I don't think you have anything to worry about. You're also working hard and will be promoted soon. I just know you will. Do you believe that you'll get that promotion if you keep at it? Then leave Kilmer's promotion be and focus on what you want to achieve.
What do you mean by I'm also working hard? Does that mean that even you approve of him, Barbara?
That's not what I meant, honey. Perish the thought.
I can't believe it. I wanted you, of all people, to be on my side.
I am on your side, honey. That's just so obvious. But if Mr. Kilmer did get promoted, it can't be helped now. And all that's left for you now is to continue doing your best, too.
Enough with the also and the too. I'm doing better than him. And I hate my company for not acknowledging my contributions well enough.
I only wished that Tim, who got angry when I tried to justify the situation by seemingly implying, even just a little bit, that Kilmer was only promoted before him and that it didn't change all the good he was doing at his company even a little bit, didn't mind all that at all. But I couldn't blame him anyway. Anyone would be a bit shocked that his colleague got promoted first, their efforts appearing the same notwithstanding. So I thought I would at least listen to him more to support him. I grew convinced he didn't want my advice, he just wanted me to listen to his venting. I interpreted it that way and devoted myself to listening to him. 6 months later, Tim told me he was going on a 2-week business trip in another city.
This is an important business trip that could lead to a big promotion.
I see. Well, that's good. I knew you could do it. Good luck, honey. He seemed very happy to hear that it could lead to a big promotion, so evidently I cheered him on. But 2 days after he left on his business trip, I got a call from a hospital. I quickly answered the phone expecting something had happened to one of my parents. So I didn't expect to be told that Tim had been in a car accident on the way to his business trip. and had been rushed to the emergency room. I called my part-time job, explained the situation, and told them that I would not be able to go to work for a while. They agreed and assured me I'd still be welcome to come back after I did what was necessary. I rushed to the hospital, and when I entered his room, I found Tim lying in bed with a cast on his leg. That probably meant he had a broken bone. The doctor told me that he hadn't woken up since he was brought to the hospital, so I became very worried. But I composed myself and thought about what I could do to help. The first decision I came to was that I should inform his company that he'd been in an accident while on the way to a business trip. I took a few deep breaths before I dialed his company's public reception number, and I told the receptionist his name and asked her to connect me to the sales department where he worked. "Of course, ma'am. Please, wait a moment." The tone of her voice was honestly a little strange, because she sounded like she was unsure of something. I had a strange feeling that something about Tim was just not right, and a few minutes later, as I was waiting over the phone, that feeling was sadly justified. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it seems we don't have an employee by the name Timothy Horowitz at this establishment. Are you sure you haven't made a mistake in his name?" "What? I don't think I did. No, his name is Timothy Horowitz, spelled Horowitz, and he has a colleague who was recently promoted by the name of Kilmer. Could you please check again?" I told them that, and they said they would check again, so I went back on hold and waited for a few minutes. Then came a truly unexpected response. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was told that Mr. Timothy Horowitz has resigned voluntarily 2 months ago." "Wait, resigned? I'm sorry. My name is Barbara Horowitz, and I'm Timothy's wife. May I ask why he resigned?" "I'm afraid I have to tell you that he resigned along with a woman by the name of Flora Nuremberg because they were both involved in an unfaithful act of adultery within the company." In hindsight, that was pretty straightforward of her, and I now appreciate it. At the moment, though, it was as though someone had slammed my chest with a mallet. I guessed the receptionist must have meant that Tim was fired from his job. But that wasn't all, because the receptionist then went on to say, "There is someone who would like to speak with you over the phone immediately, Mrs. Horowitz." "With me?" "Yes, ma'am. May I put them through?" Yes, please." And I heard the phone patched to another number, and a deep masculine voice flooded my ear.
Good afternoon, Miss Horowitz. My name is Stan Kilmer, and it's a real pleasure. It's a real nice pleasure to meet you.
I was immediately sure this Mr. Kilmer was the same one who worked with my husband.
I asked the receptionist to patch you through to my office because I wanted to talk to you personally. Is this a good time? Of course, if it isn't, you only need to say the word, ma'am.
I was so shocked about what I just heard, and I was feeling tears running down my cheeks. Try as I might, I really couldn't stop crying. I thought to myself, this is not the time to be on the phone with Mr. Kilmer. Not yet. And that was because of how mental I was. I responded, "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm in no condition to make a phone call right now."
I'm not surprised, ma'am. I'm sure there are so many things going on in your head right now. Take your time and please let me know when you're available to talk. You're more than welcome to visit my office anytime. Just say my name at the reception desk and I'll be at your service.
"Thank you, sir." I hung up. I then lost all strength in my legs and sat down on the spot. So Tim was having an affair. I couldn't accept the fact that this was the truth and that he'd been fired from his job because of it. There were so many surprises that converged upon me all at once that I couldn't make sense of all the turmoil. And I felt absolutely miserable. I was so glad that Mr. Kilmer was all too kind, though, and that gave me some hope for the future, just as I was about to leave, because I just couldn't go through with the meeting Tim right then. A nurse came and told me that he was awake. Right then, something inside me changed, and I decided I would see him after all. I was curious as to how he'd act after he'd woken up. Anyway, so I got up and walked to his hospital room. He was sitting up in bed and talking as he usually did. When he saw me coming into his room, his face lit up.
Barbara, honey, you're here. Oh, man, you were so worried about me so much that you started to cry? I'm so sorry, honey.
No, I feel fine, now that I know you look fine too. Come to think of it, I was crying because of my husband, no doubt, but not for the reasons he was interpreting. I wanted to interrogate Tim about the affair and how he got fired from his job, but I knew if I asked him now, he'd try to make excuses and cover it up, and I'd never know the facts. So I decided against demanding answers right then and there. "Are you okay? I'm guessing that cast on your leg means you have..."
A broken leg. Yep, you got that right. But it's not anything serious. The fracture was clean and the skin wasn't open. I feel fine, honey.
"But it's still a serious injury. Don't you think you should call your company to let them know you were in an accident?"
You're right. I'll call them later.
is what he responded, and he had a nonchalant expression on his face. I could only guess my husband was so used to lying to everyone that he could do it without changing his facial expressions. What are you going to do with your belongings at work while you're in the hospital? Do you want me to go to the dormitory and bring some of your stuff?
No, that's all right. I already contacted a colleague of mine from the branch office where I was traveling to bring my stuff for me.
I see. Then I guess I'll go home. I'll be back, honey, I promise. I pretended to be satisfied with the answers he gave me and left the hospital room. But instead of going home, I waited for someone in the hospital lobby. Someone very particular. I was waiting for Tim's partner in adultery, Flora Nuremberg. I was sure that he must have lied about contacting a colleague on a business trip, and that she must be bringing my husband's baggage herself. So I decided to lay in wait to catch a glimpse of any clues from a woman in the lobby and capture the evidence myself. A few minutes later, a woman appeared with a very recognizable Boston bag. It was the same bag that Tim had taken on his business trip. I quickly made the decision she must be going to my husband's hospital room, and I followed her. I peeked into the corridor that eventually led to Tim's hospital room. And lo and behold, I saw her open the curtains to the same room I walked out of a couple minutes ago and walk through the doorway inside. I moved a little closer to confirm any lingering doubt. Maybe she really was just a colleague, and I'd made a stupid assumption that his colleague was a man. Maybe this colleague couldn't come for some last-minute important reason and asked this woman to bring Tim his belongings instead. But what I heard next confirmed what I feared the most.
You're here. I was so worried about you, Flora. I'm so glad you're safe. I'm the happiest, strongest man in the world as long as I can protect you, sweetheart.
I wanted to protect you, Timothy, darling. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything.
Oh, don't you dare. You're so sweet, darling.
Not only did I hear their lovey-dovey conversation, but I also heard the shuffling of some pieces of cotton fabric. From what I could hear, I came to the conclusion that not only was Tim with this woman when the accident happened, but that he was very much in love with her. I recorded the conversation between him and his lover on a voice memo app on my phone and went home. The next day, I went to his former office and asked for someone in particular. Who was that person, you ask? Well, allow me to introduce him.
Sorry to keep you waiting, ma'am. Nice to finally meet you in person. My name is Stan Kilmer.
The pleasure's all mine, Mr. Kilmer. I've heard a lot about you from my husband, and I must admit, much of what he said isn't exactly of good nature. It was Tim's old colleague, Stan Kilmer, the same individual who wanted to speak with me over the phone. I thought he must know something about the affair, and that's why I came to his office. He was a giant of a man, and if a child told me he found Bigfoot after seeing Mr. Kilmer, I would honestly agree with them. He looked like an authentic Maori tribesman. Perhaps a tad more overweight, with long frazzled black hair, a huge beard, and traditional Maori tattoos dotting his forearms. Picture a more tanned Hagrid from Harry Potter, and you'd get pretty darn close to Stan. But while he had the body of someone who could snap someone like me as easily as a toothpick, his heart was so much bigger, and his kind personality commanded such an attractive aura. I got the feeling that if he opened his mouth, anything from a deep lesson in life to the darkest of black humor could emerge. But I would love to listen in any case.
I have something to tell you, ma'am, but I'm sure this isn't the best place to talk.
So we went to a nearby cafe, and upon sitting down and ordering drinks, Stan suddenly apologized to me.
I'm so sorry, Miss Horowitz. I'm sure you know about the affair, don't you?
Yes, I do know about it.
I'm ashamed to admit that I believe he's having an affair with my wife.
I was very surprised. I had no idea that Tim would have the audacity to have an affair with someone who was already married. Stan was not divorced yet at that point, but he admitted he was seriously considering it. I asked him where his wife was, and he told me that she was on a business trip. I was so sure of everything by this point that I felt foolish for worrying about it in the first place.
So, what are you going to do now, Barbara?
I'm obviously getting a divorce.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and that's made my mind up as well. I had the hunch you were thinking of getting a divorce, so I took the liberty of bringing you all the evidence I have. I hired a detective agency, you see, and they came back with a jackpot.
Thank you so much, sir. In that case, I'll send you the voice recording I took yesterday. I played the voice memo I recorded yesterday for Stan. As the seconds turned into minutes, he grew increasingly angry. But then he smiled and said,
Let's take what we can get.
And went a little silly with the schemes he was planning. Most of them were jokes, but some of them gave us some ideas about how we would proceed from here on out. I told him that Tim was in the hospital and that Flora was visiting him every day. We eventually devised a plan where we would storm his hospital room once Stan was off work. However, it would have been meaningless if we did not enter the hospital room when Flora wasn't there. So we decided to wait for her to arrive at the hospital lobby and enter the room when I knew for sure she would be there. And the time finally came. While I was waiting in the lobby, Flora came into the hospital with a stride that looked as though she was on top of the world. She must be so excited to see her darling Timothy. We followed her to his room, and we opened the curtains as wide as we could and charged into the room. He was startled, and the wife let out a little scream. I think we should talk to each other as our own couples from here onward. This is a hospital room, and it's not a good idea to have a fight here.
I couldn't agree more, Barbara.
After saying so, Stan marched right up to his cowering wife and started pulling her away. Hey, Tim, darling, help me. He's going to take me away. I don't want to go. I want to be with you. But Tim coldly shooed her away.
Get the hell out of here already.
With a sad look on her face, Flora disappeared into the corridor. Taken by the arm, that was the last I saw of them that day.
You trying to switch to Kilmer, huh?
The hell?
That's why you came with him, right? You're going with him now, right?
There's no way I would do that, Mr. Horowitz. Not after what you did. I'm sure my husband wasn't coldly rejecting Flora, but was angry that I had come with Stan at my side. He'd probably made the stupid assumption that he and I were together. When I denied it, he started smiling and blabbing on and on and on about the supposed nature of the affair.
That's good. I really didn't like him anyway. That's why I seduced his wife. I wanted to see his sad, miserable face, you see? I was jealous because you were always on his side, and that's precisely why I used his wife to make him suffer.
Is what he was saying, a smug look on his face all the while.
Flora and I got fired from the company together, but she is hopelessly in love with me. She's now working at a cabaret club to pay for our living expenses. She's literally paying everything for me. Frickin' Kilmer's gonna be so shocked when he finds out how committed his precious wife was to her relationship with me. He might actually cry. Don't worry. I'll work when I get better, and I'll also leave Flora.
He's actually laughing as he says so. I was utterly disgusted by the sight of the monstrosity that lay before me. Please divorce me.
Wait, what? Why? I didn't cheat with Flora because I felt like cheating on you. I cheated with her because I had no other choice to make him hit rock bottom.
Yeah, I can't accept that kind of inhumanity. I can't be with someone who plans schemes to bring people down. When I said that, Tim kept on talking, pleadingly, with tears streaming down his face.
Why are you saying such things, darling? What did I do to you? I didn't do anything wrong.
Crying won't change my wishes to divorce you, bucko. Besides, how can you say you did nothing wrong after all the pain you've caused? I never want to see your face again. With that, I started to leave the hospital room. Then Tim, who was badly injured, threw himself out of bed and fell face down on the ground. He still crawled over to me and grabbed my ankle.
I swear to you, my love, it really wasn't an affair. It was revenge, and...
You have got to be kidding me. What are you talking about? You destroyed families. Yes, plural. It's not just Stan's family that you ruined, but ours too. What kind of revenge is that? You're so selfish. Your pride is the reason you can't get ahead in life. I shake his hand away and leave the room. He was rubbing his head against the ground and crying, almost screaming, but I didn't think anything of it. Then I went to the lawyer's office. I was thinking of filing a claim for alimony, but I was told that since Mr. Horowitz was now unemployed, I couldn't do that. I left the lawyer's office and called my parents-in-law, and when I told them what had happened, they generously said they would pay their son's alimony on his behalf. Mr. Horowitz started working as soon as he got out of the hospital, and they made him sign a written letter of consent to pay back the money he owed his parents. They told me this when they delivered the alimony to me, and the divorce went through without a hitch. Stan's divorce with Flora was also finalized. Thereafter, Mr. Horowitz tried to reach out to Flora to start over, but she remembered how he had coldly rejected her in the hospital room. And she no longer had any interest in him, and now they're arguing about returning the money she had given him as living expenses. As for me, I'm very happy with my new life on my own. I quit my part-time job and started working at a new company as a full-time employee. It's a big change in environment, and I have to start from scratch, but I'm going to enjoy my new life again.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? Alright, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.